So when it comes to doing research on your family history and trying to find the indigenous side of your family, it can be a bit difficult because you either have family members who know a thing or two about your indigenous ancestors. They just don't want to speak on it. They're being stingy, give you the cold shoulder. It could be that. And on top of that, a lot of Black communities have been either burnt down to the ground, some are even under lakes, or ran off, just like the Seneca Village in Manhattan, which is now called Central Park. So a lot of our history is, I wouldn't say lost, but it takes a lot of digging, and unless you know the right people, it could be a task. Now, fortunately for me, I happen to be a part of a community that happened to keep a lot of our history intact, surprisingly. So, if you are into this type of stuff, this could be the video for you. Very briefly about my indigenous heritage, I happen to be a part of a indigenous tribe in North Carolina on my dad's side, Tuscarora, also known as Cape Fear Indians. However, on my mother's side, she has indigenous heritage as well. And I was always told Lenape and Cherokee. So when it comes to New York, a lot of immigrants migrated here. So I am a mixture of indigenous and the whole U.S. migration. And the part of Lenape that I'm a part of, or which I've been told, is the Lenape that was located in Staten Island. And fortunately enough, there is a Black community out here that has been intact, never been, well, some buildings have been burnt down, but not entirely. So according to Google, this community that I'm a part of is the oldest known Black community in the U.S. And it is called Sandy Ground, and it's been established, I think, either 1828 or 1833, but rumor has it they've been here since 1799. Now, the reason why this is important in Black history in general is because Sandy Ground was built by a group of people who were oystermen. They had farms. My mom has stories of family members out here that used to have farms and stuff. And they had churches. They built schools. And last time I checked, you had to know how to read and write to have schools. So they wasn't a group of people that didn't know how to read or write. They had their own policemen. There was a lot going on in Sandy Ground. And it was built on top of what used to be a Lenape village. And they did mix in with the indigenous people that was in Staten Island. And this is where my heritage falls in, because I have family members that came from Barbados, and then turns out also Trinidad. I just got off the phone with one of my cousins who's really deep into this stuff, and he knows all about the family history. So he was telling me Barbados, Trinidad, Lenape, they all mixed in Staten Island. And not to say that this could be what happened to a lot of Black communities all over the U.S., but I wouldn't be surprised if a lot of Black communities was built where a lot of Indian villages were at, and the Blacks that were there either mixed in with the indigenous people, or the Blacks are indigenous. They just got labeled as Black. You know, it's very, this is what I mean by it can be very tricky doing this research. And unless you know the right people, it could be very, very a long task. However, I wouldn't be surprised if that's the case. And I don't mean to use the word Black, because it would be a whole video if I try to explain what I feel Black is. And I made a video about what is Black like a while ago. But just to be broad, I'm saying Black for anybody who is listening and watching this. But you could be indigenous, you could have ancestors from Africa or Moors. It was a lot going on throughout history out here. So for me, it was the Caribbean and the Lenape that mixed in. And not saying that it was like that in every other place, but I wouldn't be surprised. Also, Sandy Ground was known for being a part of the Underground Railroad, so it was a safe haven for slaves to come here, runaway slaves. So then again, this is why is so much going on. It could be tricky of okay, who was who, and you want to make sure you're accurate before you start saying like, oh, I'm this or oh, I'm that, and it's a lot. And then from what I've learned, indigenous people were also slaves too at one point. It's so much. All I know is that my family is the whole Caribbean and Lenape mixture. And then also when the Italians came out here, they mixed in as well. The community of Sandy Ground does have a museum out here, so I haven't been there yet, but I am making plans of going there. And my cousin, he's going to take me and show me everything because supposedly a lot of our family history is in this museum, and there's history of the Lenape and the Caribbean people that came out here and the Underground Railroad. And, I'm very, very proud to be a part of that history. And I'm really proud that our community hasn't been totally wiped out like communities that happen all throughout the US. And that is very, very unfortunate. So when I go to this museum, I am going to document a few things. Um, and like I said, this could help you in your research because not only were the Caribbean people that would come out here, there was people from the South coming up here and Virginia, Delaware, Maryland. So it's a whole blend, and you never know. This might like set off a light bulb in your head, especially if you live in those places like Virginia, Delaware, Maryland, the Carolinas, Georgia, because they came up here too. So, yeah, for me, it is important to bring out the indigenous history a little bit more because since a lot of us are searching for that side of our family, and since it has been switched, our ancestors were called Black, Negro, Mulatto. It is important to give back the original names of our ancestors, whatever tribe they was a part of, because it's so much confusion in this community, the Black community in general, and no one knows who's who, or people are afraid to speak up. Or like for me, I did have family members who didn't want to tell me nothing, even though they held a lot of secrets. They were holding back, especially like the older generation that is no longer here. I don't know what it was. I think um they was threatened not to say that they were indigenous or had that in their family. It was a lot going on back then, and they held back a lot. For example, I was this is I'm getting to the point of this. I remember I was watching um documentaries of music from back in the day, like jazz and stuff like that. And I was watching Screaming Jay Hawkins. He's like one of my favorites. And from there, I was watching a guy named Calloway. He was a jazz musician or something like that. And he knew he was indigenous. However, he just went with the whole Black label because it was more beneficial to be labeled as Black than saying you're indigenous. So that was probably the case for a lot of our relatives back in the day. It was just more beneficial to say that you are Black rather than indigenous. Yeah. So yeah, I'm definitely going to come back with an updated video on this. And I apologize if I sound a little bit off in this video. I am tired, and I'm also getting over a little bit of a cold because of the change of weather and everything. So I apologize for that, but I really wanted to get on here and talk about this because, like I said, it is so important.